Today we're going to talk about the alchemy of the midnight sun. Um, Something that the ancient Egyptians spoke about, the midnight sun, and what is the midnight sun? Well, we're going to talk about that throughout this episode. If you think about the fact that we are in a night cycle, then the midnight sun is really the full moon. Because during the night we see the reflected light of the sun on the moon, and when the moon is full, that's basically the midnight hour. It's a moment of silence, and it's really that moment when everything turns and reverses again. And you can see in this one image on the right, it's Thoth as the ibis bird and Thoth as the baboon, and it's wisdom from without as the ibis bird and wisdom from within as the baboon. And the baboon is handing basically the eye, the left hand eye and the right hand, the right brain, left brain consciousness. He's basically handing this, this left brain, which is it's the left eye, right brain consciousness. He's handing that back to. It's a coming together of the two. This is what the full moon is again all about. Just like noon, when the sun is at the highest in the sky. Well, this is that moment when the sun is at the highest in the sky on the other side of the planet. So they're really, again, speaking about cycles within cycles within cycles. Know the patterns and know what's going to happen next. And the image on the far left, you're actually seeing the two eyes with the full moon in the center. It's the journey of perception as the cycles of the moon. It's the ebb and flow of the moon, and this is what Kansu represents. He's that image of the netter in the middle, toward the top, and he is called the traveler because he is the waning and waxing moon and all the different stages of consciousness. So it'll be lots of fun, but we wanted to start off today. We want to continue what we were discussing in the last episode, which was all about the cycles of the sun and what's happening right now in our solar system. And it's just so amazing that this past, we're recording this today on May 13th, but this past weekend we had all this activity that we talked about in the last episode. And it's almost, it's so bizarre that it all started to happen all at once. And
it seems like the world suddenly woke up to this, solar cataclysm possibility over the weekend.
Well, yes, because what happened was, we did get zonked, and it was like we had 3 hits, direct hits of X-class flares. And then it was, we got another one. And then it became 6. And the 6 was like, an X5.8, super huge, direct hit again. So we were going to be zonked.
And the 7th is still on the way, I believe.
The 7th is still on the way, not quite as powerful. But this is boom, 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 boom. And it starts to even, when you combine so many at once, the effects become greater. And it just seems like everywhere on social media, and you can see on the images on the left, there were amazing pictures of these northern lights, the aurora borealis, all over the planet. And again, we were just talking about this, and we are going to continue that discussion. But now it's happening, just like we said, we are on the precipice of huge changes in our world, and we need to be ready. We were excited. I remember I wrote to Allan right away and said, Ben said there was a 12% chance this could be the kill shot, and meaning this could be the one that takes down the world's grid.
The next Carrington event.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's not the strength of a Carrington event, but with the weakened magnetic field, this kind of event can be much worse.
And the weakened magnetic field is the one element that everybody's leaving out of this when they're discussing it.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say next. The next day, even major news media was covering these events all day long and talking about the sun and that this was the biggest solar storm that we'd had in 20 years. But what Alan just said, they left out the fact that we have a weakened magnetic field, making it exponentially um, more severe, basically. And remember, it's not only giving these wonderful, beautiful skies, and this comes from it's Lindisfarne Castle it's basically in the UK on the North Sea, just spectacular, beautiful, um, and so many more. It's not only giving us these beautiful auroras; it's literally it's inserting into the earth. The earth is getting charged, and that means we're being charged. Our bodies are being charged, and it's a reminder again that we need to stay in optimum health, because that charging is an awakening. It's an enlightening, but it's also we're still physical. We still believe we're physical bodies, and so it's going to have an effect in some way. And it's good to keep that in mind, that we need to keep ourselves in shape and to be, in all different ways, our lungs, our hearts, our minds, that we start to feel edgy, remind ourselves to sit, meditate, whatever it takes, what you use, your tools to find your center. With me, my cats were literally all over the place. I couldn't calm them down, and their hair was like standing on end. They were supercharged, and just petting them was like spark, spark, spark. And there were electrical fires. There were all these different. We had glitches in the internet. We had them here, lots of them. Sites weren't working right, and it would take a while to get them to work right again. Different areas got hit harder. Some areas didn't notice much at all. But wow, I wish I had seen this. I looked out my window. Some of these auroras were as low as the Caribbean in Mexico. Yeah, I was just talking to a friend in New Zealand, and she said, just an hour away they were seeing them, but not where she was. So you had to be lucky. I always think of when I saw it when I was a child, and it was like this. It was it moving and beautiful and waves. It was just gorgeous. I'd never seen anything like it, but you never forget it. So everything we've been talking about is literally a lead up to this magnetic pole shift. And of course, people have been talking about it. It's not in the news, but it's in the scientific news. Astrophysicists have been talking about it. Ben Davidson, of course, has been talking about it. And a lot of these, I'm including right now are, from Ben Davidson, but he's not the only one talking about these things. But as we brought up in the last episode, there was a major anomaly and an acceleration that happened in March of 2023. And that started the weakening in the magnetic field to really start going exponentially. And it already had. It kick-started at the beginning of the 21st century. The 21st century. It had already kick-started, and now it's in a super acceleration. And this started last March, so a little over a year ago. And now, and again, we were talking about record low latitude auroras that happened all last year. There were 5 of them. That was a lot. We've already surpassed that this year. But, what he's saying here is it began in 2023 when the weakening of the magnetic field began to escalate. We've already had more low latitude aurora events this year than we've ever had on record. And guess what? We've surpassed that this year. And with this weekend alone, it's absolutely phenomenal what's happening. When it came down to Pennsylvania in the 1960s and I saw it, that was a big deal. It was a very rare event, and now it's happening all the time. And this speaks to the weakening magnetic field. This is why it's happening. So we're getting more radiation. It's definitely getting into the Earth's grid, and we are going to see effects from this. And we need to start really looking closely at what that means for us. And here you can see the numbers. Here's a list of low latitude auroras that started in 2001, 2003, 1991. Well, when it really, one in 1859, one in 1882, one in 1903. You can see that this is a slow escalation. It started to speed up 5 times last year, and I put in big writing May 10th because this was huge. It was a weekend of this, and they weren't. They were. We did have X-class flares, but when you see this, it brings it all into perspective because we 1859, the Carrington event was an X80. The biggest one we had this weekend was an X5, 5.8, right? And it was more powerful, not more powerful than the Carrington event, but what we experienced was more than what they experienced in all the other years following that. And that's huge. So here we have a slide that shows, how far they were saying this of the auroras went on May 10th. Truth is, it dipped a lot lower. There were sightings in Mexico and the Caribbean. And here you can see in Florida, El Paso, Houston, Arizona, even Tucson. I saw someone post a picture from Tucson. It's really shocking all over California. And it was intermittent. Not everybody saw them, but so many people. I've never seen so many beautiful pictures all in one weekend. And here, I'm showing you the arrow at the bottom. I added that because, it dipped that low. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It's big. So keynotes, auroral record broken. No major solar activity. See, this is the anomaly. If there had been, one of those super, flares, X flares, it would have all made sense. But this wasn't. In the first few that we got the low auroral sightings, it wasn't even an X5. So this is huge. Earth is more vulnerable due to a weaker magnetic field. I know we keep saying it, but it's important. Because this is the shield. This is the wings of Isis and Nephet. This is what sparks our resurrection. That's big. Before Ben had said full magnetic flip expected in the 2040s, he's actually altering that now. And he thinks the sun may definitely take out global power before then. So these are events that we need to start having in the back of our mind. Governments have told people to start storing goods. There's power outages in different places. I talked to someone from Canada today, and they're having, like I keep telling everybody, we're having these blanket power outages every day now here in Egypt. Well, people are starting to get them in other places for different reasons, but this is new. We didn't have that when I was growing up. There's things happening, and of course that's by design. In Egypt, they're having them to actually, yes, conserve power, to sell our power to other countries so we can earn the money to get goods that we can't get because of the escalating prices and the value of the dollar rising. There's just so many things happening on the planet today that are, these are in our face things that we need to think about, not be afraid of. I'm never talking about, oh, we need to be afraid. We need to be cognizant of what's happening. Open our senses, be aware, be ready, look at the patterns. How do we navigate them? Yeah, these are major events. This is big. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Highly unlikely it's going to happen tomorrow, but it could. I was like this weekend, I was like, wait a minute. I thought I had, so much more time before we started seeing these bigger events. But maybe we don't, maybe we do. But again, any kind of additional radiation is going to affect us in one way or another. So we are experiencing major events, even if it hasn't toppled our world yet. That's the key to remember. Um, Here are Ben's new predictions for on the pole reversal. And as I said before, he said, certainly 90% in the 2040s, 10% chance in the 2030s, and that's only 6 years away now. Now, and this was this was before May 10th. He said 70% certain 2040s and 30% chance 2030s. So that's a big difference in percentages. Um, and that can change in a heartbeat as well. So I think I might have mentioned this once before. Even the government started talking about these events and the cyclical cataclysmic events that we have on the planet. And they released this book that was written by Chan Thomas. They had a lot of parts of it blackened out, but if you do some research, you can find the full version. It's available at certain different corners of the internet. But if you start to research this, you'll find that there are videos available. I think Ben did a whole video, a long one, on what was written about in this particular book. And again, this has been a CIA-held document that talks about these things. So this is known. This is known. So I saw this great picture of a glyph from Sago Canyon in Utah, and it's just beautiful. And the minute I saw it, before I read anything about it, what I saw was him hold it. It's sort of like I saw the sun, and I saw rays coming from this arc of the sun. And what I know symbolically is arrows, and this is all over the world, often symbolize powerful rays of the sun, be them nurturing or fierce rays, like we've talked about with Hathor and Sekhmet. And so he's got his bow out, and he's taking the rays of the sun as arrows. And isn't that sort of what we're talking about? This burst of energy coming from the sun. They even told us this weekend that if you put on your the glasses you wore for the eclipse that have, what is it, infrared, you could have actually seen the sunspot, as powerful as it was. And some people did get pictures of it that I saw on social media.
Wow.
So I immediately saw this as shooting arrows or rays or flares from the sun, as rays or flares from the sun. But what was given as the kick phrase here was star people bringing knowledge to the masses. Maybe it's the same thing. If you think about it, this radiation is illuminating. It's plasma, and we've talked a lot about plasma. And plasma is consciousness, and is this awakening us?
Evolving consciousness directed straight at us.
Exactly. Isn't that fascinating? You can say, and people think star people, that means aliens bringing knowledge. They fly down in their spaceship and they teach us how to plant a seed. But maybe it actually means, star stuff, radiation, plasma coming down and hitting us because of a weakened magnetic field and awakening us. This is the true star seeding, in my opinion. Just a thought.
And we are that consciousness, so really it's like taking us to another level.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Alan. And of course, we have talked about it a lot before, but I like to add, and some of the slides we'll see today we've seen before, but it's another way of connecting all the dots. This is a new one, and it's the 11th hour in the Book of Gates. We're getting toward the midnight hour. And the serpent who burns millions is spitting fire over 4 headless bound captives. And remember, the captives are usually the upside down and backwards, right? That's us. We're in the cave, Plato's cave. And it is accompanied by 2 knife-wielding, cat-headed goddesses. You can't see this part. Also carrying out the last judgment by burning enemies in flame-filled pits. And between them, they remove any possible threats to the sun rising at the end of the 12th hour.
Digestion, the physical again.
Exactly, exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. We will no longer be held hostage in this matrix of energy, our magnetic field, that this is the release through enlightenment. And it happens as part of the cycles, the breath of life. And this is related to all the rituals they performed, to their stories about the sun getting old, because this is what this is about. It's a story of the sun and how it gets old and tired and has a moment of resurrection and renewal. It's the story of Osiris. It's the headset festivals where the king would go through these rituals of renewal and resurrection. So they tell it, the story, over and over and over again in many different ways and mythologies, to tell us and remind us that when we reach this stage in our great year, we'll know what's happening.
Well, it's also worth remembering that when they were putting this knowledge down, they were thousands of years from the last time this happened and thousands of years until the next time this would happen. So they had this knowledge seemingly the wrong time.
That's exactly right. They were still, they were falling from, right brain consciousness into left brain consciousness, but they weren't as far down polarized as we are. So they still had a remembrance, and they knew, the early mythologies, and when we started using written and oral language, that's all embedded in the very ancient myths and symbolism, and it was continued on through the tribal, cults, and until it became something more formal. So we're seeing something very old, and we see it. We see it in the petroglyphs. We see it in much older symbolism. Even the headset, they say, happened in pre-dynastic times. And then it becomes something that's performed by still living kings, and then it becomes a ritual because they no longer can go through the same processes. They've forgotten how. And we'll do a whole episode on the headset just to explain, what that's really about. It's phenomenal. And a lot of what we see in our religious dogma dates back to what was happening during the headset festival. But here, look at this wonderful image. On the far left, you see an image of Osiris, and he's the ruler. He's showing his dominion as the king of the underworld, the night cycle, our cycle. I've had many people write to me and say, "Is Osiris our god?" And is projected as our representative. He is us. He's the earth out of balance when the axis of the earth falls. And we've shown this illustrated it so many different ways throughout our episodes. And when Osiris rules the underworld, look below him. Set is upside down and falls into form. And remember, we likened him to, the wasp scepter, that, falling into the jed through the loop of the womb that is part of the ankh. And it's into the spine, it's spirit falling into form. And I gave you the bigger image, and I did make him right side up, but he's upside down on the papyrus. And it's a Ptolemaic period papyrus, but it gets this idea across. That they are just two sides of the same thing, just like Set and Horus, different ways of perceiving the world. So why did we fall into form? Why did we do this? Why did we leap through the portal, the birth canal from the stars into an earth-based consciousness? And this comes from Rami Danoa, and it's just beautiful. He says stories in the Vaishnavita Hinduism recount how ancient sages jumped up and down in joy at the coming of this degenerate era we find ourselves in. They saw how the density of karma would make it so much easier for people to mature their consciousness. There may be pandemics, climate catastrophes, and social unrest, but that doesn't mean we necessarily need to fantasize about better times and spaces. All we require is right in front of us. Reality is constantly dishing out to us exactly what we need to grow. The question is, are we listening?
Mm.
And if we are, we might find that it's easy to develop heavenly qualities in a world of abrasive personality, given the right tools, knowledge, and strategy. And this was, according to Buddha, never wish for heaven. What you have in front of you is much more valuable. Different way of looking at it. Um, and the image I use is an image of an angel from Roslyn Chapel falling into form, upside down. And you can see she's being bound by ropes. And that's us. We are the we were the gods that once walked the earth, and everything was turned upside down when we moved from right brain to left brain consciousness, and we fell into form. We fell into um, this belief that we are our bodies. And it's just as easy to overcome this and remember how powerful we really are. And I still love this quote by Kurt Vonnegut, "Everything is nothing with a twist." And I saw this little clip, and it shows you, it's literally this Mobius strip. And when they use the Mobius strip and they turn it, all they do is twist it. It shows you that there's the hero's journey. And we go from being on top to being upside down and backwards, back to being on top again.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yep.
So Rami goes on to say, after all, each person is giving you a chance to test and develop your patience, detachment, groundedness, and unconditional love. We might even discover that adversity brings out the worst in us, exactly in time for us to notice it's enough to transform. According to Buddha, never wish for heaven. Of course, what you have in front of you is much more valuable. So very cool. And we've seen this before, but everything is nothing with a twist. And that is our patterning of life on earth, in nature, in everything. It's always this, and this is Draco, and Draco moves both directions in our perception. So we perceptually, we see things from one side of the brain and then to the other side of the brain, and then we find our center, which again points to the Cat's Eye Nebula, or our ecliptic pole, and represents all the things we've been talking about for so many episodes now. And this is a quote from Graham Hancock, and he says, change is imminent. The bird's eye, and now we're going to talk about Angkor Wat and Giza, and how they relate to each other. And they both were on this ancient magnetic equator that the Sphinx is aligned to. And you even see the Sphinx in this image. And Graham says the bird's eye plans of Angkor and Giza have captured the highest point in Draco's trajectory and the lowest point in Orion's. The end, in other words, of one half cycle of precession, and thus the beginning of the next. The last occurred in the year 10,500 BC, in which the ecliptic North Pole, and that's about 12,000 years ago, 12,500 years ago. We're due, folks, but in which the ecliptic North Pole lay due north of the celestial North Pole at dawn on the spring equinox, and the pattern of the stars in the sky was taken as the template for the pattern on the ground of the monuments of Angkor and Giza. Since that golden age, rotated by the churn of precession, and we've done the churning of the milks illustrations several times to show how this works, the celestial pole has traveled a full half circuit around the pole of the ecliptic. The pendulum of Orion and Draco has likewise swung back almost as far as it can go, with Draco now at its lowest point and Orion at its highest. As in 10,500 BC, in other words, the timekeepers of the sky who stand at the gates of immortality are poised to go into reverse again. A great change is imminent, a change that could be for the better or greatly for the worse, depending on humanity's own choices and behavior. I can't stress that enough. And if you look at that image, there's your Draco, there's your Orion, there is the dance between the two. And it's showing, the sun, it's a day and night, Aquarius and Leo, all the things we've been talking about. It's Orion and Draco, rise and fall of man versus his serpent power. when we're left-brained, we're literally in a belief we're our bodies, and when we're in right brain, we reclaim our serpent power. We feel the currency. We know how to navigate, harness it, and become the serpent power. And this is so huge. And even these two representations of Orion, here he is, the hunter, the man, he's out in this left brain mentality. And then you have Draco as the dragon, the great serpent in the sky, always depicted even as the crocodile sometimes in ancient Egypt, which is a water, a water animal. So, or I said animal, I really meant reptile, right? But yes, so Orion and Draco are linked by the cycle of precession in a great cosmic seesaw, which swings up and down like a pendulum of time itself. Computer simulations covering thousands of years show us that as Orion's altitude in the South Meridian steadily rises, Draco's altitude in the North Meridian steadily falls. When Draco reaches its lowest point, Orion reaches its highest point. Then the opposite side of the cycle begins with Draco steadily rising and Orion steadily falling. The up motion takes just under 13,000 years. The down takes just under 13,000 years. Now, this is if you're considering the precession as a 26,000 year cycle. I think, there's a lot of theories that it's around 24,000, that the precession and, again, time and space are illusions. It's just the pattern that we're looking at. So yeah, they were looking to the forces of nature to create this magical symbolism that tells us our story. And Allan and I have been to Cambodia and all over Angkor Wat, and it is laid out to the pattern of Draco. And there's so much that's magical in Cambodia, and I think we need to go back again, Allan.
I agree.
We know so much more now, don't we?
Yeah.
And here's
go there. You can read the site like a giant open textbook. I mean, the symbolism is right there.
It's in your face. The symbolism's there, and the structure and the sculpture. And also, we found so many portals and so many dynamics that were similar to what we see in Egypt and other places in the world. But their use of, materials in their structure and, the symbolism is the same, only different. Because, of course, it's we shift around and migrate around the earth, we're going to have different ways of looking at the same thing, but telling the same story. But yeah,
a lot of portals, like you said, a lot of spots at the site of energy, earth energy coming up out of the ground. But we
and the use of water.
We noticed that a lot of these portals were blocked by, later on, somebody came along and put a big stone over it, and maybe
the lingams. They had the lingams.
Cork or block or dampen the flow of energy.
Plug it. Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. But they did have the use of water, and water we see everywhere. At the stone circle sites, we see water being used. They choose the sites because of underground running water, and then of course, they were also channeling water above ground. And this is in Peru and everywhere that we've been.
Right, and the sacred lakes, these giant square pools aligned to true north and south. We find them everywhere at temples in Egypt, at Angkor Wat.
And they even had the dynamic of Tefnut. If you remember, we walked down to that big lake that had the island, and the whole dynamic was about the ebb and flow of water, and the different, netters or gods, forces of nature that represented that dynamic of Tefnut, which again we see everywhere in the world. And there's Tefnut in front of us, the Sphinx. And of course, she's looking for Leo to rise on the horizon at a certain time, marking a change in cycles. And directly opposite of behind her, of course, we're going to see Draco and Aquarius, because if you're seeing Leo rise on the horizon in the northern hemisphere, you're going to see Aquarius rise on the horizon in the southern hemisphere because they're
Right.
opposed. So why build and embed hidden messages within the megalithic structures? Um, again, from Graham, the Giza Plateau and anchor buildings point to a single date over the period of 10,500 to 10,400 BC. What was so special about this date, and why did the ancients endeavor to mark it? Probably approximately every 13,000 years, a certain global scale changes take place on Earth. Cataclysms, earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. That's Sekhmet raging.
Mm-hmm.
Such changes are somehow connected with the Orion-Draco pendulum. Hence, the ancients marked a 0 point for us, the time of the last cataclysm. They marked the cycle, having constructed monuments in Egypt and Cambodia so that we would look at the sky and determine the 0 point. And being aware of the cycle could assume when we should expect subsequent global changes. And this is what we're talking about. This is what I've always believed as well, that we have this wealth, this heritage of knowledge and wisdom embedded in symbolism, mythology, and structure all over the world that speak to us of these moments. I mean, Göbekli Tepe is another. It's all about informing us of these cycles so we know how to navigate them. And that's why we're talking about, what's happening with the sun and all of these events. It's not to create fear, it's to create awareness. Because there are many ways to deal with this, and fear is not the way. And that's also part of the symbolism that they left, and we've talked about it many times. Horus harnessing, transmuting his polarity. There is no beast. The only beast is within. We transmute it, change our perception, change our reality. And so we're talking about the game board. We're talking about this, what's happening. You have Ipet Taret in the center, and she often wears Draco on her back. And we're talking about this spin in the heavens and how it affects us. And this is our game board, and this is our potter's wheel. And at some point, I'm going to do a whole presentation on water and consciousness that I think is really going to knock your socks off. I have talked about this in a few of my other online conference presentations. And when you really understand how all of this grows from a depth of knowing, from the very point of creation until now and back again, it's mind-blowing. How you see all the pieces begin to fit together. And part of this is really the potter's wheel that is spoken about in the Bible and in ancient Egypt, with the potters being either Ptah or Khnum, forming, creating form on a potter's wheel. And as the potter's wheel begins to spin, you have Anubis coming out of the belly. And I've shown this slide before. The belly of Taret or Ipet is basically the ecliptic pole. And out comes Anubis, the path opener, riding the mare, which is a plow. It's the little dipper, which is called the plow in different places in the world. And that plow is a tool for opening a path for water to flow. And this is the watery waveform, right? These are the magnetic grids. This is what, Anubis embalms us in. As he's the alpha dog creating the alphabet, and that plow becomes our first letter. It's A. It's mind-boggling how clear they were. In plain sight, here is the knowing, and they're telling us how we fell into form. As we descended into a night cycle. And the alpha is the seed of life. That's what we're looking at. And of course, this potter's wheel is the Milky Way, and it's the hair of Hathor. And she gives birth to form, the Alpha and Omega. And this is at Zep Tepe, of course, the very first time. And as I said, Anubis was the sacred embalmer. He wraps us within the patterns of the space-time continuum. And it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful description of who we are, where we're at in this moment in time. Um, this is creation. I've shown this before. The sun rises over the circular mound of creation at the moment of silence, right? You can see there's the symbol that is Osiris's head at resurrection time. No movement. We are pointing to that ecliptic pole. You see the path openers. You see, at the bottom, you see that the feminine netters pouring the magnetic field around us with the Ogdod in the center holding the mares. There's 8 creating at creation. And Newt says, I raised them out of the watery abyss, out of that inactivity, to create form, our world as we know it. And here's Ptah as the divine potter, right? New pot, where we get our words potential and potency and so many other words. And Ptah is known to be the thing that pops from out of the blue primordial waters as the mound. And his cap are the blue primordial waters. And it is the potter's wheel from which we fall. As the wheel begins to spin, liquid light falls into form from the heavens. We are star stuff. This is where all our terminology comes from. He is wrapped in his own wings as all matter exists as a perception of containment until we turn it around. And as Allan said, we digest matter again and go back to the primordial, the purification of the primordial. And what's even more interesting, we've always talked about star seeds, and we are seeded, seeds of consciousness. We are planted as seeds in the dark earth, so we can reach for the light, of the rising sun. And here it is in the center of the Dendera zodiac with this mare, and mare itself means love. And so in the beginning, our world was seeded with love. Taweret, this is the primordial waters of consciousness. It is love. And Taweret, illustrated as a hippopotamus or lion, was revered in ancient Egypt as the pregnant mother and protector of pregnant women and their children. And with Draco often shown as a crocodile on her back, she was associated with the circumpolar stars and the Big Dipper. Her hand rests on the mooring post from which our perception of time and space emerges with the spinning of our Earth's axis, which points to this significant place in the sky. And I go on to say what I just did, that then you have Anubis coming out on this mare and creating the alphabet, our language itself. It's incredible, and it's a story of our seeding, the seeding of form. So we came from love, we go back to love. And how beautiful is that? And here we see Hapi, and he's sitting here, and he is Aquarius. I have the image of him as Aquarius on the ceiling of Dendera in the upper left-hand corner. And this is an image of him. He's at the harvest time. He is the fertility of the waters. He has that rich paramagnetic soil within his waters at the Great Flood. And the Great Flood comes at the time of Aquarius. Hapi dumps the waters. And it's our harvest time. And behind Hapi, you see the Bennu bird. And he sits, on top of the mound as it arises at the next stage. So again, a moment of silence and then a renewal, resurrection. And it couldn't be more clear than that. And we begin our return to the primordial, back to center. And I've shown this a few times now, and it's images from the Dendera zodiac from S.A. Magni. And at the bottom, you see we have Leo, we have the lion looking backwards with his arms, his paws on the symbol for Aquarius, and in front of him is Horus the bull, Saturn. And of course, Saturn rules Aquarius and is that moment of reversal that we have talked about. It's all speaking to this moment in time. And here is Hapi as Aquarius. He nurtures the Ba, or spirit of Osiris, with the two waters at harvest time. And this again is the resurrection. The Ba is the spirit. This is the moment we move out of form and we become the formless. And it's a process. We fall into form, we rise into spirit. We're not done yet. This is the great awakening, but we have a long way to go to get back to center. But it's much more exciting to be traveling in the right direction. And we talked a lot about plasma, we are being bathed, as we've shown with the weakening magnetic field, we are being bathed in plasma. And this is, again, a return to primordial consciousness. And here's an update from Jason Estes, and he says, as the solar flood ramps up, we're being hit with millions of particles a second that act like stem cells for the soul, quite literally being bathed in plasma to remember who we are in this photo from Space Weather Live. It really shows how awesome what is happening. So again, it's not something to be afraid of, it's something to awaken us to who we really are.
So we in the Aquarian flood now? Is that what this is? The influx of plasma flooding in?
I think this is the flood. I honestly do. We want to think in terms of what we know. Oh, we're going to get, there's going to be a tsunami and we're going to be, flooded with water. Well, it is a tsunami. We had a tsunami this weekend. And we have been, inundated with, space radiation.
Right. So instead of water flooding us, it's primordial consciousness.
Feels that way, doesn't it? I start to feel different. I've talked to you a lot about, the last couple of months of how my intuition is heightened beyond what it used to be. And I thought maybe it was just going to be a small window during the eclipses or, the spring equinox, but it's still happening.
It's the new normal.
Yeah, I think, and that's a beautiful way to describe it. I think it is the new normal. This is what's happening to us. This is an exciting time to be here now. We lined up for this. And there's a reason for that. And instead of falling into all the fear traps, and I'm not saying put your head in the sand and, stand on, top of the building and wait for the radiation to totally lift you up into the heavens. It's nothing like that, but it's, open your senses and make great use of this moment. And if you're aware of what's happening, it happens in a much more beautiful way.
Yeah, figure out how to ride this current rather than fight against it.
Exactly. Or as a friend of ours used to say, surfing the currency, surfing the waveform. That's the key. We can surf the waveform if we know what's going to happen next. And why not? Why not? And here's this wonderful image, and it's the where. And Stephen Mailer used to talk about this all the time, and he called Abdel Hakim Omian the great where. I say, remember, we are the star people, made from star stuff, as Carl Sagan told us, birthed from the great potter's wheel in the heaven. We are primordial waters. We are love at our root, at our core. When we're, coming from that wisdom from within, we're looking in instead of out to define ourselves. And the where is defined as he or she who remembers and knows, is the greatest, the teacher of the star knowledge, the seer of the time-space continuum, the elder of wisdom, the greatest of the greatest, great of wisdom. This is who we once all were until we forgot who we are. And this is the great awakening. This is the great remembrance. And Hakim told us this all the time. He'd look at us and he'd say, my gosh, you have it, wake up. And he knew. And this is another thing Hakim would always talk about. He said we could rely on the one who knows water. And you see, it's hard to see, but you see this figure And he's sort of manipulating this currency that's coming from the Nut jar. Nut, sacred water from the heavens. You can rely on the one who knows water. Self purification is a return to the primordial. The ultimate aim of ancient Egyptian and Sufi mystics was to reconnect with the bliss of at-one-ment by seeking to return to the original state of the purity and unlimited potentials of the primeval waters. Wow. Why not? And it's again being cognizant of our thoughts and feelings and emotions in every given moment. Are we going to give in to the anxiety that our physical form creates within us? Or are we going to remember who we are, understand what's happening to us, and surf the currency instead of allowing the currency to take control of our emotions, and to create more chaos? We are the ones that choose. And I don't know how many different ways I can say it. And of course, again, the magnetic field becoming weaker. We've talked about this. This has become, it's known. It's just not talked about in major news media. Like Allan and I said, they didn't talk about it this past weekend when we had all this solar activity. But, this is the huge signal that this is what's happening now, our resurrection, just like it was Osiris's resurrection. And this symbolism tells us that this is exactly what's going to happen and what's going to happen next. We've shown these before, we've talked about them before, but this is the great reversal. When you look at the resurrection scenes of Osiris, it shows us that he has to turn over before he can rise. This is the key. We have to reverse our perception. That's a pole reversal, in my opinion, when we're talking about what's happening on the earth today. I mean, we can do it in any given moment, change our perception, change our reality. And that is the root of what's happening anyway. But again, understanding why and what's happening makes us walk through it with grace. And that changes everything. Your perception changes everything in how you will experience everything happening to us, and that will begin to happen more frequently to us. Another image I've shared before, and Osiris basically says, turn over, Osiris, and rise. This is the key. Yeah. Here we see a wonderful image. There we again is the head of Osiris. Kundalini of the earth is rising. Neheb-Kau as the serpent, with the wings, right? This is the great awakening as the serpent, serpent consciousness, and then it moves. It's Kundalini, and it. The words of the god Atum, Adam, right? The magnetic field, even. He represents that. All is Atum, the Taurus field. And his words at this time describe this dramatic moment. He says, I will destroy everything that I have created. The earth will return to the none, nothing, primordial water. To the water is in the primordial age. I am the one who will remain with Osiris. I'll turn back into a snake, which is not known by men and is not seen by the gods. I'll turn back into a snake. Serpent power. Wow. And here's the rest of that image. So you see where I was. Here's the head of Osiris rising on the horizon, that moment of silence, the sphinxes, right? After that, you see Neheb-Kau coming out with the wings, and the Keper, right? The winged Keper, the new beginning. And you see Geb head over heels, the turning of the earth. And look what's next. You have Geb with the serpent head.
Oh.
And above him, we've turned from a masculine image to a feminine image.
Wow.
right? Left brain, right brain consciousness. Does it get any more clear than
That's amazing.
that? Pretty cool. So do we rise together? From Manly P. Hall. I've read this once before, but it's so cool. In the spreading of the bone between the eyes, called the frontal sinus, is the seat of the divine in man. There, in a peculiar gaseous material, floats, or rather exists, or is, the fine essence which we know as spirit. This is the lost city in the sacred desert, connected to the lower world by the rainbow bridge, or silver cord, and it is to this point in himself that the student is striving to rise. This is the sacred pilgrimage of the soul, in which the individual leaves the lower man and the world below and climbs upward into the higher man, or the higher world, the brain. This is the great pilgrimage to Shambhala. And as that great city is the center for the direction of our earth, so the corresponding great city in man is the center for his governmental system. Um, he's speaking to this moment in time, and it's just another way of looking at it. Go within. The body isn't even real. It's the journey. It's the journey of perception. And we haven't shown these cycles since one of our first podcasts, the second or third one. But these were the cycles as given to us by Abdel Hakim Almian. And Kepper is the moment he said we were in right now. We were precessing into Kepper. And the winged Kepper is the rising sun. We're here, folks. And the next stage was Ra, the stubborn. It's moving our way up to the sun, and we're beginning to feel our power again. And then we get to Nun, Un, the wise one, the sun at its zenith, or at the strongest. But that's when we're moving the other direction. So next step was Aten, and then Amun again when we fall back into form. But we're moving the other direction. So we are going to experience its reflection on the moon. We are hit the nadir now, not the zenith. And so we will see the reflected light of the moon as the midnight sun. It's the reflection of the sun from Un on the other side that we are experiencing. And so when we see the midnight sun, that's when everything turns around again and we climb back up to our highest state of consciousness.
That's tough to grasp.
I know, but you have to realize we are in the night cycle. We are Jed, we are dead. And we have fallen down to the nadir. That's where we're at. We're pointing, our axis is pointing to Polaris. We're at our greatest form of polarity with separation, consciousness. We've hit bottom. And this is the great turning point. And when you're at the bottom, of that circular path, right, around the globe of, the Ouroboros is basically the Milky Way around the globe of the Earth, and it's above us and below us. We just can't see it in the daylight. But the moon shows us these processes, the waxing and waning moon. But when it is a totally full moon, it's basically, Un or Noon. It's the midnight sun, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You're seeing the full expression of the sun reflected on the moon as full-blown consciousness. And when it's reflected on the moon as the moon, that's the midnight sun instead of the daylight sun, which happens at noon. Does that make more sense?
A little, yeah.
On the other hemisphere, there is no hell. It's the underworld was the southern hemisphere at night. Maybe that's the key I left out. We're always thinking of heaven and hell, but hell is really us. We're in hell, and we're trying to get back to heaven, which is
right, where the
rising sun.
Head hostages upside down.
Exactly.
Stuck in the matrix of Plato's cave.
And you see why I keep repeating myself. We've covered this several times, but you have to always keep these thoughts in the back of your mind as you continue to look at different symbols. because they're all talking about the same thing, but it's upside down and backwards to us. And that's why I keep repeating myself. So this is actually a symbol of the midnight sun. Manly P. Hall calls it, and others, Harold Boulette calls it the spiritual sun. The human spirit shining through the darkness of the body of matter. The image is a reproduction of the lunar boat in the upper register of the Anemone stela, but it's showing you, look at the left brain and right brain consciousness, and the moon is in the center. Again, it's the midnight sun is a centering moment on the moon, showing us reflected on the moon. And we are also the reflected light of the sun. We are shadows. So Apuleius said that when describing his initiation, at midnight I saw the sun shining with a splendid light. The midnight sun was also part of the mystery of alchemy. It symbolizes the spirit of man shining through the darkness of his human organisms. It also referred to the spiritual sun of the solar system, which the mystic could see as well as at midnight as he could at high noon. The material earth being powerless to obstruct the rays of the divine orb. So basically, it's saying that the mystic knew that there was no form. He knew he was not his body, and therefore he could see the sun and the moon come together as one. And that's that moment of silence that I keep talking about. So this is what Manly P. Hall is talking about.
In the last episode, when I brought up that I didn't understand what you were talking about when we would look to the south for our orientation, I understand now what you're saying, because when we're not physical anymore, what is north or south?
Exactly. Thank you. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I'm saying. So, and they used words and language that we can easily misinterpret if we're not staying true to what I've been talking about from the beginning. It's been a hard journey for me to see all this. But as it unfolds, it's absolutely incredible in its beauty. And I think the translations as given to us also confuse us because the translators didn't understand. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
So, it's not described in the best light, so it's harder for us. But if you really read between the lines, you can totally understand it. So he goes on to say, the mysterious lights which illumine the temples of the Egyptian mysteries during the nocturnal hours were said by some to be reflections of the spiritual sun gathered by the magical powers of the priests. So, of course, the priests, had to show off what they knew to be true, based on their, this whole holding on of this depth of knowledge that they could no longer share with the masses who didn't understand it any longer. So, we are waking up now to begin to understand these deeply profound truths of who we are. And this is Khonsu, and he does represent the moon. And what's interesting about Khonsu is he's shown in different images. In one, he looks just like Ptah, wrapped in his own wings. And he has the waset going through the womb of the Ankh and into the Jed, just like Ptah, at that moment of falling into form. And on the other side, you see him as he looks like Horus, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. But he has the moon, the full moon on his head, right? And so what we're actually seeing is the waxing and waning moon as Khonsu. Mm-hmm. He's rising and falling of conscious perception, the ebb and flow of consciousness as the different aspects of the moon. And like I said, he was known as the traveler. And he's showing us, again, another hero on the hero's journey that goes from that first step, and goes the whole full circle into the full moon, full-blown consciousness. And here, is the other image that I showed in that first title slide. And it's a return to heart-based consciousness from within. This is Thoth again, and in his two forms, consciousness above and consciousness, within, heart-based consciousness versus mind-based consciousness. Bring the two together, and you've got it going on. That's full-blown consciousness, the moment of silence. I think I've done this with you before, Alan, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. I think
Yeah,
so.
the precession of consciousness as these ages, and as we go through these ages, we do see different cataclysmic events every time we turn into another age. They are cyclical, and it shows, every aspect of it is showing us, this same precession of consciousness. From the age of Leo, after a micronova or, meteors and comets, all these events are happening. Another weakened magnetic field, younger Dryas, floods, different flood events, end of the Ice Age. Manetos's Egyptian chronology begins at this moment. And the phrase for the age of Leo is I will, manifestation. This is the beginning, right? And then we go into the age of Cancer. And that's the age of Aten. That's the moment of silence. We are centered and we come out in the age of Cancer. Self-awareness, birth of form, I feel. No words needed. We still didn't need written words and language. These are the fallen angels when gods begin to become men. We were the gods that once walked the earth. And then the age of Gemini, 8,000 years ago, huge earthquake, Tower of Babel, language is introduced. I think, mind, right? This is, Gemini is Mercury. This is when Thoth as the ibis bird emerges. It's a recognition of a masculine and feminine side. The currents, yin and yang, begin to separate. The yin and yang is Cancer. Contained. We feel both masculine and feminine. And then in Gemini, the twins separate. And this is the end of the age of the gods. And we move into the demigods, the followers of Horus. And then we move into the age of Aquarius, which is around 6,000 years ago.
The age of
following
Taurus.
another. Go ahead.
The age of Taurus, you mean?
Yes. We fall into form, and there's another catastrophic event in about 3000 BC. There was a comet that hit Madagascar. So again, a turning of an age, and then severe climate change, great floods. That's the Noah flood, and the beginning really of the age of Amun. In the age of Taurus, the phrase is, I have. And we begin to sequester, we begin to store things, it's sort of like the materialism of humanity begins, and everything's about, I, me, and my. And we love our creature comforts.
Stubbornness of the Taurus people?
Oh, yeah, that's all related. We become very physical. We like our physical pleasures. We like our wine, and we like our fine foods, and this is all Taurian qualities. And Taurus is ruled by Venus. And then we fall again a little bit more in the age of Aries, and Aries says, I am. This is the ego, and this is Ramses II. He said I am on every statue in ancient Egypt. He literally, this, and of course the avenue of sphinxes with the ram-headed, the ram-headed sphinxes is all about the age of Aries and so many different things. And again, a small catastrophic event in approximately 1650 BC. And I think that's the time too of the volcano in the Mediterranean, Santorini Island.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all about the warrior archetype, extreme patriarchy, and the Hanuti begin the suppression of women and mysticism. So you have the witch burnings and the suppression of the healing arts and the knowing, the great, we call it feminine knowing, but it's the feminine within all of us. There were witches, excuse me, but there were also, there were the shaman and, they say warlocks. I like shaman better. But yeah, it was that healing, that nurturing, that feminine right brain knowing is totally suppressed, or they
And
begin
this
this.
is the chaining of the unicorn that we see
Exactly,
in all of the
exactly.
iconography.
Yep, exactly. And you see that all over Scotland. And of course, they had the horrible witch burnings there and worse. And then we move into the age of Pisces, and it's all about the fish in Christianity, and Horus becomes Jesus. But the same knowing presented in different ways. And this is, I believe, so we're beginning to think for ourselves in a way. And then in Aquarius, we become masters of the mysteries of water again.
Yeah.
And this is the reversal after the midnight sun.
One half of a precessional cycle.
Exactly. Exactly. It's 6 and then 6 again. Maybe that's where the 666 comes from. But it is. It's, we have the 12, we have 24,000 years in the Vedic, the Yuga cycles. And like I said, that 24 to 26,000 years of precession, it's all about this, we're moving around the zodiac signs backwards. And this is our journey. That's the hero's journey. That's this movement of consciousness. And it happens, we fall through 6 ages, and we rise through 6 ages. And it's just a beautiful patterning. And this is what Hamlet's Mill was all about, that all the different understandings of this precession and the flows of consciousness. And this is from Thomas Brown, J. Brown, and he says, Hamlet's Mill is a legendary Norse myth that tells the story of a magical mill that grinds out different materials before breaking down and producing a maelstrom of rubble. As the Earth's axial precession moves us through the different constellations of the zodiac, it has a profound influence on human consciousness and the course of history. It's a metaphor for the cosmic machinery that drives this cycle of history and consciousness. The different metals that it grinds out symbolize the different ages or epochs of human history, each with its own unique characteristics and challenges. Firstly, the mill grinds out gold and precious jewels, bringing peace and happiness. People are content, harmonious, life is prosperous. This is the age of Aten. Secondly, the mill grinds out a darker metal, silver. The world becomes materialistic and selfish. People begin to accumulate wealth and become competitive with each other. Thirdly, the mill grinds out an even darker metal, bronze. Violence and war break out as people struggle for power and resources. The world becomes chaotic and unstable. Anybody relating to this stuff? And fourthly, the mill breaks down, falls into the sea, producing a maelstrom of rubble, symbolizing the end of the great epic cycle. The world is plunged into darkness and chaos, and the cycle begins anew. We are here now, in case you hadn't noticed it yet. That's what we're talking about. All is a tomb, and here you see the flow of everything that he was just talking about. And you can see how these ages work, and it's all about the flow of the Taurus. And right now, I talked about how the southern hemisphere seeds the northern hemisphere, but when that flips, like any hourglass, then everything is reversed and changes. And we see this energy flow, from the golden age, and then to the silver age, and then into the bronze and the base of the iron age, and then the flipping point when everything goes back to the golden age. And the center, of course, is the null point or the wormhole. And this was from a diagram that was created for the Stargate 2012, which again was a date based on lots of calculations. But nothing ever happens immediately. It's a precession. We gradually migrate into these things, and then suddenly everything's reversed and changes. And that's sort of like where we are now. So I showed this in the last episode. The rabbit hole is the portal at the center of the Taurus. And I asked then, are you ready to jump in like Alice did? And you can see here it's connected to the third eye, this portal. It is the place where, time and space are morphed. And I couldn't resist. So who takes us into the rabbit hole? He's sitting there asking, are you coming? And again, I've shown this before, but the rabbit in the moon of the southern hemisphere, this is what you see. And I saw this when I was in Australia, New Zealand, and Peru. You see the hare or the rabbit in the moon. And it seeds the man in the moon in the northern hemisphere. And that's all about to reverse. And it's Alice, it's the white rabbit who takes Alice down the rabbit hole. And he lures Alice into the otherworld dream state for a very significant time in which she learns that her sense perceptions can be quite perplexing and unreliable. And when I see him, pointing to the clock, I always remember hearing, you're late for a very important date. And it's sort of like where we're at right now. It's time. Are you ready to jump in the rabbit hole? And this from Nassim Haramein, the Taurus or primary pattern is an energy dynamic that looks like a donut. It's a continuous surface with a hole in it. The energy flows in through one end, circulates around the center, and exits out the other side. You can see it everywhere, in atoms, cells, seeds, flowers, trees, animals, humans, hurricanes, planets, suns, galaxies, and even the cosmos as a whole. Cycles within cycles within cycles. It's always the same. All is attuned. Are you about to take the leap? Are we all about to take the leap? And it's a theme of death and resurrection. The Easter Bunny, that's what it's all about. He's the southern hemisphere seeds the northern hemisphere. The rabbit brings the Easter eggs for renewal. And in some ancient cultures, the hare is the messenger of the great goddess, moving by moonlight between the human world and the realms of the gods. In China, it's the moon rabbit who mixes the elixir of immortality. Easter is celebrated on a Sunday after the first full moon, the midnight sun that follows the spring equinox, a time when all of nature is awakened from the slumber of winter and the cycle of renewal begins. That is where we're at in the great year, the Platonic great year.
Easter, resurrection, it's all related.
It all starts to make sense, doesn't it? Time is the illusion. Alice says, what a curious feeling. I must be shutting up like a telescope. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English.
I like curious.
Exactly. She says, now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Time and space are morphing. And we're starting to feel that now. Time is speeding up. Sometimes it slows down, but it's starting to get, nothing is what it once was. Everyone's complaining that we don't have enough time in a day anymore. I certainly know, I feel it. All the things that I used to be able to achieve in just a morning, it can take me longer than a full day now, and it doesn't make sense. But yeah, a quote from Einstein regarding time from the Isaiah Effect by Greg Braden. Everyone is confused about time. It does not flow in only one direction, and the future coexists with the past. Big fan of Greg Braden, too. So we've shown these before again, and it's all the things that Allan and I have been talking about, how it all works. Left ascension, right ascension, Ra, La, Sa as the first breath. These tones, this language of light that tell us all about these dynamics. We move from the night cycle into the day cycle in this process of moving through this figure 8, the infinity symbol. And it's expressed in the Sima Tui as the breath of life, and it's always the same thing. And the moment of silence is expressed in many ways, but you see it on the pillars as the winged feline or lion. Same dynamic. So objects may appear larger or smaller than they are in the mirror. Time can seem faster or longer. Alice says, am I different? I was Alice yesterday, but everything is different today. Perhaps I'm not me now. So who am I? That's the question. So we're going to give up our identity, our need to, that strong egoic urge to prove something that, we are always trying to prove ourselves on continuums of right and wrong or good or bad that really don't exist. It's all an illusion. And we have this great moment in time to redefine ourselves and it's again so important to remember that we have choice in this, that we are the co-creators and we can co-create who we choose, what we want our reality to be and how we choose to present ourselves or project ourselves into this reality. We've always been in charge. We've always been creating it, and we just didn't know it. So this is from before. I said the Golden Gate is a bridge, and we talked about how we fell. We went through the Silver Gate and into the Lion's Gate and into the Silver Gate of the Moon. And this is what we just talked about with all the ages and stages and, even our words, the Moon Gate, the Gate of Men. And we have Min in Egypt meaning seeding, and Men, Menet, Mantu, mountain, minute, month, all representing these moments in time through our language. And it's the night cycle. But if we look at it again and we go through the Golden Gate, and the Golden Gate is a bridge, right? It's a portal. It's a whole different ball game, and we go through the gate of the gods. We rise into spirit. And here I have Kansu, and his hairlock represents, again, Leo. And Leo is always in the center. I did put the midnight sun in the center here because we're going the opposite direction. And it's all about direction. And, we're looking at right brain, left brain consciousness. It's consciousness, it's perception. We don't have to even envision the earth stopping or doing any of the things I'm saying. It's all a pattern to explain what's happening with our perception. And when we realize that, we don't have to be afraid. See, this is the real key. That, if we really believe we're physical and the earth is material, then yeah, we have something to be afraid of. But if we really know and embrace the fact that we are not, that we are light beings, and science has told us we are light beings, we are consciousness, then all bets are off on what we choose to create next. And here again, here is that image from Abydos that represents the head of Osiris, and it could represent an Ark of the Covenant. We did a whole couple episodes on that. And if you look at the image on the far left, it's from an interior of a coffin from Abydos, and you have Whipplewat and flying into center, just like I showed you Anubis embalming us in the waveform. Here is Whipplewat, his alter ego, flying the current back to center on either side of this wonderful moment of silence that is the resurrection of Osiris, the ecliptic pole. Isn't that cool?
And then you've got the two figures with the wings down.
I got that in close up. Now look at this in your close up. You can see that the wings are basically, and this is, again, it blew me away, is Mut. And Mut is what? Mut is that moment of silence. And she's got her wings around the two lions, and they are mummified because the lions are the currency, the earth currency. And so Mut has silenced them. Isn't that beautiful? Wow. And then when it starts to spin again, you see the two figures? When that, it looks like they might be holding it steady, but when the axis starts to spin again, it falls again. And we fall back into a perception of form after a moment of silence. So many things, you have to look so closely. The attention to detail is just amazing. So here we have an image of Atum, and Atum again, all is Atum, and he's emerging from the male winged snake known as he who takes away the hours, a place of no time and space. And you can see the eyes on either side of him bringing you back to center. And it's that another beautiful moment. And, we're back in serpent power. Atum is always riding the current. It's incredible. And I saw this, and it really describes so much. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. So again, when you change your thoughts, your patterns, your attitudes, you change your perception of reality. You change everything. So we don't have to see a world on fire. We can see a world of resurrection butterflies. Isn't that great? Just speaking to what we've been talking about. How we view what's about to happen is how, maybe we'll experience. They're probably pointing to heaven and hell, but same thing, isn't it?
That's very true.
And this comes from Story Waters, and it's from his chapter 3 of The Messenger. And it's really a beautiful way of also talking about this beautiful magical mirror. He says, marvelous magical mirror, reflect me as a human life. We are the one consciousness seeking to know itself. Although this starts with seeking to know our mortal reflection, it leads to seeking to know the wider reality from which it emerges. As explorers of consciousness, our intention is the result of this universal process. This leads us to seek how to know the wider reality. However, when we look at the wider reality, we do not see what it is because it is too vast and reflective. Instead, we see what we are looking to see. Interesting. This is, and it speaks to what we've been talking about. I think this will always be found, sounds better, because that other place, that wider place, is infinite and contains everything we could ever imagine. To look in the infinite mirror of perceptual creation is to see whatever you want to see, experience whatever you want to experience, create an experience of reality, and create a reality to experience. We are powerful. We have to just remember how powerful we are. Because everything in our environment is a reflection of us, our thoughts, our expectations. And if we can transmute our polarity and get to the place where heaven meets earth, then we can create anything. And that sounds so cryptic and, oh, right, Patricia, But I think it's easier than we think it is. And adepts have done this.
Well, is it possible that we're doing it now?
I think it is. I think we do. And because we're wrapped up in we're in a chaotic time period. And when we get caught in chaos, then we create chaos. So it's an encouragement from the past. They're encouraging us, challenging us to be able to find the silent space within, in a world, peace amidst the chaos. We've said it over and over, but I think it's easier than we think it is, but we become addicted to the chaos. We're addicted to the emotion. I have to admit, when I saw the solar flares coming, I had a little rush. Like, oh, wow. We are human beings, and we are on this game board, and it's so hard not to be triggered by things emotionally. But if we can bring ourselves, if we can cut the head off the serpent, the currency of chaos, then we find that peace and we create new peace. And this is beautiful. This came from Martin Gray. I introduced you to him when we were in Sedona 2 years ago. Great, wonderful man who has written so much. He is a photographer for National Geographic, and he wrote Padma Sambhava. Say that, if Padma Sambhava represents tough love. He is rarely, almost never shown smiling. He isn't concerned with New Age popularity rankings. He isn't interested in hearing your drama or how hard you think you are trying. His message is simply be quiet, get centered, and get serious. And I think that's the time we're at right now. We see what's happening, all the stuff we've been predicting and talking about, and everybody said, oh, this is coming. Well, guess what? It's here. It's not totally in our face yet. I'm not saying, that the kill shot's going to happen tomorrow. If it ever happens, I can't even say that. But we're in this pattern of energy, and if we can find our center, find our source, go back to the primordial waters of consciousness, and that, self-purification, then everything shifts and changes. And I don't think we have to experience all the craziness, but we have to do it as a society, as a civilization. And I think that's how we restore peace on Earth. One person at a time. Sounds hokey, but I really believe in this. And I don't think you need to have everybody doing it, but boy, I don't think it hurts either to, spread the word, spread the knowledge, share the great feeling, be a different person, be the one that consciously, changes your own environment. There is a ripple effect. And here we have Hathor's mirror, and it is the reflected light of the sun. It is on the moon. It's a full moon, full expression of consciousness, and there's Thoth standing in front of it, holding the energy on another birthing box. Because every end is a new beginning, and it's Hathor's mirror, the reflected light of the sun on the moon. We are a reflection of consciousness creating. To know thyself, according to Socrates, was the foundation of wisdom. We are co-creating our own reality, challenging us to be more present and clear with our intentions, attitudes, and responses to stimuli. And that pretty much says it all for today. It's a lot to think about if you're serious. We always have the choice to just put our heads in the sand and pretend nothing's happening. And we're all would choose. It's so much easier to just get on with our lives and hope and pretend that nothing is happening.
But I always wonder, are we going to reach a point where even those die-hard people with their heads in the sand, are going to have to sit up and take notice of what's happening around? Like, there's gonna come an inflection point where you just can't ignore it anymore.
We are getting so close. And I do have many friends that every time something happens on the sun, they send me, Patricia, did you see this? People are waking up and are more aware. And with this past weekend, with even the major news media talking about the sun and the events, and it is slowly, many people who don't want to see it are beginning to say, wow, this news is spending a lot of time on this today. Maybe it is important. Even though, they didn't really go into the possibilities of what this event meant. If you are willing to look a little deeper, research a little more, you find the articles that are saying what this can mean for humanity and for the Earth itself and the solar system and what's happening. In the last few episodes, we've talked about this. There is a galactic sheet and it's hitting us, and that's primordial consciousness and it's shifting everything in the galaxy. This is a huge moment, and it can be the most wonderful, beautiful moment we've ever experienced. And I believe it really can be. So when you research and you see a lot of fear mongering, don't get caught up in the fear trap. Turn it around. And as I said, you study about what they're discovering with consciousness existing in, waveform is conscious. Plasma is conscious. We are conscious. We communicate and interact with everything in our environment. We are the ones that have all the power to make or break anything that happens next. And that's the thing to walk away with all of this. Finding the tools, and there are so many out there, so many people teaching how to meditate, how to heal the body with sound and frequency, and so many other modalities, scalar energy. This is the time to start looking at those things. Break away from the explosive medicines and the things that are actually hurting our bodies, and go to nature, go to the herbs, go to the, nature gave us everything we need. The ancients told us that. And when we start to revere the full forces of nature, I think we turn everything around.
All we have to do is plug ourselves into those patterns of nature that are laid out so beautifully.
And start listening to nature, to the mycelium, to the trees. They know, they've been trying to get us, when we're out in nature and you think of something profound, or you say something to a friend and suddenly the wind picks up and nearly knocks you over, that's nature responding to you. And there have been so many books that are even written about this. When you are aware, you begin to see that everything is communicating with you all the time. My cats communicate. I know exactly what they're saying. They have different tones for what they want to say, and they're unique, and they're sent, they are really communicating. And if you don't pay attention, you don't know that. And it's the same thing with everything. Your cells, your body is always talking to you. It's always telling you what you need. And nature, and we've talked about it. I talk to trees, I've talked to rocks. Everything is alive and sentient. And I think, the ancients did, and that's how, they developed all the plant medicines and all the things that, they knew. They talk about a time in Egypt when, the lions were tame, and, all the animals, were tame because we were in a state of higher consciousness, unity consciousness. And we can return to that. Right?
Right. Very well put. Thank you, Patricia. You have a couple of tours coming up. People can find all the information on our website, horusrising.com. We've mentioned.
Absolutely. And Allan and I are in the stages of creating something really magical for next year, so please stay tuned. We hope to be talking about that very soon, or even when this is fine. This particular episode is posted. So
absolutely. We've got a lot coming up. Thank you so much, Patricia. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.